Over the years, the F1 games have definitely evolved, and it seems like every year there are changes that people either love or ones that they absolutely hate. Today, I'm going to go over a few things that I hope to see added or removed from future F1 games. Before we get into it, please consider leaving a like or subscribing, it really helps me out, and feel free to join my Discord, which is linked in the description. That being said, let's get right into it. For starters, one of my favorite things about past F1 games were the classic F1 cars. There was something so incredibly fun about taking a break from the current year's cars and hopping into one of Schumacher's Ferraris or Senna's McLaren. The handling on these cars felt different to the ones in the modern era, and the noise these cars make is insanely good. I know that some people didn't really care for this feature, but for me, these cars were always a total blast to take around a track in time trials, and I always had a ton of fun doing so. However, that being said, I only really enjoyed them in time trials. This is because during a race, there were only so many cars within the same era that could compete against one another, so the realism kinda went out the window. When doing races in the classic cars, half of the grid ended up being in cars from different eras, which completely took the magic out of it. The other half of the grid would often end up in the same exact car as the player, which again, totally shattered the realism. There's an extremely simple fix for this. In my opinion, classic cars should definitely be brought back into the F1 games as they're a lot of fun, and since so many newer fans are now playing the game, it can introduce them into more history of F1. However, I think the game should only include about 3 eras. Take some of the best years of F1 from the glory days and add one car from each team. This way, players can easily do a race where they select a team, and the rest of the field is realistic to that era. Sure, some of the other teams won't have such iconic cars, but driving them will still feel just as fun. For example, Senna's 1988 McLaren could be added, along with some other teams and cars from that year, like Benetton, Ferrari, Lotus, Minardi, etc. This would allow players to experience a real race in one of the cars from this era. You could do it with other eras, like the teams from 1997. You could have Villeneuve's Williams, Schumacher's Ferrari, Häkkinen's McLaren, Alesi's Benetton, Fisichella's Jordan, and much more. Racing on a full grid with these iconic cars would be so much fun, and it's definitely something the F1 game should add in the future. Something else I'd like to see in future games is more complicated crash physics. For years, players of F1 games have asked for this, and they've sort of added it. In today's games, you can damage your wing and snap your suspension, but that's about it. In the future, I would definitely like to see some more in-depth aspects to this part of the game. For example, more visible side pod damage would be a good start, as there already is performance hindrances coded into the game when your side pod is damaged. The car feels much more difficult to drive with this kind of damage, so it would be nice to see some actual physical evidence of it. Similarly, rear wing damage also lowers the performance of the car, so why not have more visible damage in the game? I'd also like to see the rear wing collapse or crumble after a big crash, like it can do in real life. Another cool thing, and this is probably not going to ever happen, would be if they added fire to the game. I know it'll definitely never be added, but how cool would it be if your car caught on fire after an engine issue, considering how often that can happen in real life? Overall, updating the damage models of the car would be hugely entertaining for players and make the experience much more realistic. Another thing to add focuses more on the career mode side of things. My Team mode is probably the best aspect of the F1 games, as it allows players to control almost every function of a Formula 1 team. However, there are some improvements they can make. For starters, selecting tracks for a season makes no sense. When starting a new season, you have an option of a full 22 races, 16 races, or 10 races. Why? What if I want 20 races, or 17 races? What if I only want to remove the new Vegas track or Miami, because they're both terrible? Why does that limit me to 16 races now? I like to see a more customizable race calendar when starting a new season. Additionally, more customizable liveries would be very nice. I don't like how there are only 5 slots for sponsors, and they must be repeated throughout the livery. Why not add more? The sponsors are also incredibly basic, and they only allow the player to add a single color. In real life, brand logos have multiple colors to feature on the cars. One way to fix this would be to add a Forza Motorsports type customization, where sponsors can be dragged and dropped where you want them to be on the car. This can help simulate creative sponsor placements like the Duracell sponsor for Williams this year. On top of this, the base liveries are always terrible, and you can never really make your car look realistic compared to the rest of the field. They added different paint types, which is definitely a help, but it's not really enough. More sponsors on the car as well as more realistic, updated liveries would be great. Lastly, I think there are more game modes that the F1 games can experiment with. F1 World was kind of a flop for me, I never use it. On top of this, I haven't really had any desire to play the Breaking Point storyline. However, there are many solutions that could replace these modes. For example, a combination of these two game modes could focus on the life as a young driver and progressing through the racing categories. Starting out with karting, a future game could include some karting races with unique situations or stories similar to Breaking Point. Karting would be a total blast and players would love it. Then, moving up the ranks of motorsport as your character progresses would be quite interesting. This would give the player an incentive to engage with these storylines, as it offers a new feature in the game. The problem with F1 World and Breaking Point is that while they offer unique situations, you're still driving a Formula 1 car. Changing some of the racing aspects of these game modes would definitely be very fun for the player. Overall, this year's F1 game is pretty good. The AI are much better than years past, and the driving mechanics are much more forgiving, allowing players to experiment with more tracks and have more fun. Most of the things I listed in this video are purely cosmetic items, as they aren't really game altering, but they would definitely improve the player experience. Let me know in the comments what you think of the F1 games and what they should change. There are definitely lots of aspects to this game, so I'm interested in hearing what you guys think. But if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.